Good day, friends of ArcGIS Pro. Today we are going to talk about labels and labeling a particular feature class. In this example, I'm working with my Utah data as I was in my previous sessions. I'm going to try to label some of these ski boundary areas. These note are polygons, but that doesn't really matter. I can label any type of feature class, whether it's points or lines or polygons. The first thing I'm going to want to do is check to see what type of attributes are available to label. So I'm going to go into the attribute table for that particular feature class I want to label, and I'm going to make a note on some of these different attributes. For instance, I could choose to label the name of each one of those polygons, or maybe the price, or any of these other attributes I can use. I'm going to use the name to label that particular feature class. So once I've done that, I'm going to close down the attribute table, and I'm going to select my layer in the contents pane, and then I'm going to select the labeling tab that's in my contextual menu. In the labeling tab, there's one thing you probably want to pay attention to moreover, and that is the field name. So in this case, I already said I'm going to label the name of that field, and I'm going to want to make sure I turn the label button on. So enable labeling, and then that'll show my layers. Now, when I zoom in, I'm going to take a look at some of these different layers. These are my feature classes for the ski boundaries. Those pink layers, I'll just turn off some of this other stuff so you can see it a bit more clearly. But you'll notice that each one of these layers now has a label associated with it. So here I can change the style of the label text if I want. I can fine tune it a little bit better if I use some of these drop downs for the style of text or the size and some of these other attributes here. Also note, I've got some label placement options. So one thing you'll want to make sure is in the More drop down, make sure that you're using the Maplex label engine, because that will give you some additional features for your labeling choices. Once you've got that selected, you can go and check out some of the different options here for basic polygon or boundary polygons, land parcels, etc., etc. Keep in mind though that if the label is too large, it will have difficulty labeling using some of these different methods. So for instance, if I'm using a fairly large label, you'll find that the label does not show up. So you will either have to choose a different option, like perhaps a basic polygon, which will place it on the outside, or you can go ahead and change the label size to something a little bit smaller so it fits inside that polygon. Also notice over in my visibility scales for my label, I can choose on where I want to see those labels and when I don't, depending on my scale value. So right now I'm at a scale of about 1 to 300,000. If I didn't want to see these labels as I zoom to a smaller scale, I could go ahead and say at 350,000, do not show those labels. So right now at 322, I can still see them, but as I zoom out to something smaller, a smaller scale, they disappear. And as I zoom back in, they will appear again. I can also do this with my zoom in beyond as well. Another interesting feature is your SQL query feature here. So if I want to filter layers so that they are or are not labeling, I can use my SQL query. So if I click that little SQL query button, I can either go hardcore and code in SQL, or if I want to use a clause wizard, I can go ahead and select clause and then go add clause. So here I could filter things out so I am only labeling or not labeling certain features. For instance, let's say I didn't want to see any of the labels for ski boundaries that are very expensive. So I could say is not equal to things that have a large value, and then go ahead and say add and apply, and what it'll do, it'll filter out the ski boundaries that fall within that category. So where it is not equal to, it removes those layers. That's about it for labeling, and thanks for watching. Bye now.